Welcome back, everyone, to another part of our Wisdom of the Scholastic series.
It's great to be diving into Aquinas again.
Absolutely. Today, we're digging into his work of God and his creatures. We've got some fascinating writings here from you, the listener, and our goal is really to unpack some core ideas.
Ideas about God, existence, reality itself, big stuff.
Big stuff, yeah. But we want to make it accessible, find those aha moments without getting, bogged down in overly technical jargon.
Exactly. Aquinas offers such a systematic way to think about these huge questions. The pieces we have really build logically.
They start right at the beginning, don't they? With God's nature itself.
But his very being, and then how that connects or maybe contrasts with everything else with creatures. It's quite an intellectual journey he takes us on.
Okay, let's jump in, maybe starting with something really fundamental.
Yeah.
The simplicity of God.
Yes, that's a cornerstone. Aquinas argues, this is in chapter 22, that in God, his existence and his essence, what he is, are identical, one and the same.
Identical. So, not like us. For us, that I exist is sort of separate from what I am, right?
Right.
A human, a cat, whatever.
Precisely. And this identity in God has some major implications. For instance, chapter 23 talks about how there can be no accidents in God.
Accidents? You mean like qualities that aren't essential, things that can change, like my hair color or something?
Exactly. Non-essential properties.
Yeah.
If God is pure existence, pure being, there's no underlying substance separate from his being to have accidents added onto it. It's just complete.
Huh. And he goes deeper. Something about substantial differentia. Sounds complex.
It does sound a bit technical, yeah. But the idea is straightforward enough. A substantial differentia is what distinguishes one kind of thing within a bigger category. Like rationality differentiates humans from other animals.
Okay.
But Aquinas argues in chapter 24 that you can't add something like that to God's existence because, as chapter 23 says, God isn't in any category, any genus.
So he's not a type of being, he just is.
He is being itself in its fullness. There's no broader class to put him in and then differentiate him within it. His simplicity means he's utterly unique, not composed of genus and difference like created things are.
Okay, this is clicking, but it raises a question for me. If God is so simple, just pure being, how do we avoid thinking of him as, just an abstract concept, like the general idea of being itself?
That's a really important point, and Aquinas anticipates it. In chapter 26, he specifically warns against that interpretation.
He does, good.
Yeah. He says God isn't merely the formal being of all things, not just some universal idea we abstract in our minds. God's being is concrete, actual, intensely real. His simplicity means he lacks composition, lacks parts. It doesn't mean he's vague or merely conceptual.
Okay, that makes sense. No parts, but fully real. And the simplicity, does that connect to the idea of God's perfection?
Directly. If God is pure, uncomposed being with no potentiality, no lack, then he must be supremely perfect. Chapter 28 discusses God as universal perfection.
Universal perfection, meaning all good qualities are found in him.
Essentially, yes, but not like a collection of separate good things. All perfections, goodness, wisdom, power, exist in God in a completely unified, simple way. Creatures then reflect these perfections, but only partially, analogically, as chapter 69 explores. They have goodness, but God is goodness.
Which leads to the challenge. How do we even talk about a being like that? What names or words can we possibly use?
It's a major question. Aquinas tackles it head-on. In chapter XXX, he affirms that we can predicate names of God. Things like good, wise, living.
But wait, if God is perfectly simple, how can we use multiple names? Doesn't that imply different aspects or parts?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But chapters XC1 and F66V explain that these names aren't truly synonymous. They don't mean exactly the same thing when applied to God, even though God himself is one simple reality.
How does that work?
Our human minds are limited. We grasp God's single, infinite perfection through different concepts derived from the limited perfections we see in creatures. Right. So wise points to one aspect of his perfection as we understand it, and good points to another facet of that same unified reality. The multiplicity is in our way of understanding, not in God himself.
Okay, so the names aren't identical in meaning.
No.
But they're not totally unrelated either. This sounds like the concept of analogy.
Exactly, you've hit it. Chapters 32, UD3, and XE4 are crucial here. Aquinas argues that nothing is predicated of God and creatures in exactly the same sense that would be univocal predication.
Like saying Socrates is a man and Plato's man means the same thing.
Right, but nor are names used completely differently with no connection, which would be equivocal predication.
Like bank, meaning a river bank and a financial bank. Just the same word, totally different meaning.
Precisely. Instead, he says, our language about God is analogical. When we say God is good and a person is good, the word good points to a perfection that exists perfectly and fundamentally in God, and derivatively or participatively in the person.
So there's a real connection, a similarity, but also a huge difference in the way that perfection exists.
Yes, a similarity of proportion, you could say. The goodness in the creature is proportionally related to the absolute goodness that is God. It's more than just using the same label. It reflects a genuine, though distant, likeness.
That's a really important concept for understanding any theology, I suppose.
Absolutely fundamental.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The sources also talk about God's knowledge. It says God perfectly understands himself.
Yes, chapter 47. Since God is his own infinite intelligibility, his act of understanding is perfectly directed towards his own essence.
And chapter 48 says he primarily and essentially knows himself alone. That sounds inward-looking, almost exclusive.
It can sound that way initially, but it links back to simplicity and perfection. God's knowledge isn't like ours, gathering information from outside. His primary object of knowledge is his own infinite being.
Oh, then chapter L says God also have particular knowledge of all things. How can he know only himself, primarily, and yet know everything else in detail? Seems like a paradox.
It does, doesn't it? Chapters 50 lie, LE-no, and LE3 wrestle with this. The solution Aquinas offers is that God knows other things by knowing himself.
Oh.
Because God's essence contains the blueprints, the intelligible patterns or ideal forms for everything he creates. In perfectly understanding his own essence as the ultimate cause and source of all reality, he simultaneously understands everything that flows from him, everything he could possibly create or allow.
So knowing himself includes knowing everything else because everything else derives from him.
Exactly. The multitude of things doesn't exist as separate objects outside of God that he needs to look at. Their intelligible reality exists within the divine understanding as expressions or participations of his own infinite perfection.
Wow, okay. That's a profound idea, these ideal forms existing only in God's mind. This leads us, I think, to the next topic. Subsistent intelligences, angels.
Right. Chapter 59 introduces them. These are beings whose very nature is intellect, pure minds, essentially. Aquinas argues they can't be corporeal, can't be physical.
No.
Because intellect, the power to understand, deals with universal immaterial concepts. Tying it essentially to a physical body, which is particular and material, didn't seem right to him. So these are intelligences that subsist, exist purely as minds.
And unlike God, these created intelligences do have a distinction between their existence and their essence.
Yes, very much so. Chapter 52 makes that clear. They receive existence from God. Their essence, what they are, a particular kind of intellectual being, is not identical to the fact that they exist.
And they also have potentiality, unlike God, who is pure act.
Correct. Chapter 53 points this out. They can learn, understand new things, move from potentially knowing something to actually knowing it. They have potentiality within their being, which is a key difference from God's pure actuality.
Makes sense. And chapter 50 says they're imperishable because they're not physical.
That's the reasoning. Being immaterial, they aren't subject to physical decay or decomposition. They don't corrupt.
The sources even touch on whether such a pure intelligence could be united to a body. Plato's view gets mentioned.
Yes, chapters 56, LD9, and briefly LDI. Aquinas engages with Plato's idea, which is often described as the soul being like a pilot in a ship, sort of directing the body from outside.
But Aquinas wasn't fully satisfied with that, was he?
No, he found it insufficient. For Aquinas, especially regarding humans, the soul isn't just piloting the body, it's the very form of the body. It's what makes the matter be a living human body. It's a much deeper, more intrinsic unity than Plato suggested.
Right, the form-matter distinction. Okay.
Yeah.
This connection between soul, body, and understanding naturally leads us into thinking about human happiness. Chapter XL says, happiness isn't just knowing God by faith in this life.
Right.
Faith is crucial. It gives us truths about God we couldn't discover otherwise. But Aquinas sees ultimate happiness, the complete fulfillment of our intellectual nature, as requiring something more direct, a vision, an understanding of God's essence that goes beyond faith alone.
And we don't even fully understand ourselves in this life, according to chapter 46.
No, our self-knowledge is imperfect. We come to understand ourselves through our actions, through interacting with the world via our senses and intellect. It's not a direct, intuitive grasp of our own essence.
And the big one, chapter 47 says we cannot, in this life, see God as he essentially is.
That's a clear statement. Our intellects, operating through the senses and tied to our physical condition, simply aren't equipped to grasp the infinite divine essence directly. Our knowledge here is always mediated, indirect, incomplete.
So putting it together, if happiness requires seeing God's essence, and we can't do that here.
Then, as chapter 48 concludes, the final, perfect happiness of human beings is not attainable in this life.
It points beyond our earthly existence. It has to. Even the pure spirits, the angels, Aquinas suggests in chapter L, find that their natural knowledge of God, while great, doesn't fully satisfy the infinite longing for God that's inherent in an intellectual nature. Ultimate fulfillment requires a supernatural gift, the beatific vision.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly now to God's will and how he acts. Chapter LXXX says God necessarily wills his own being and goodness.
Yes, that seems almost self-evident given his nature. God is infinite goodness, so his will is perfectly and necessarily aligned with his own being. He can't not will his own perfection.
But then chapter LXXX says he does not necessarily love or will other things besides himself. How should we understand that? It sounds maybe a bit detached.
It's about necessity versus freedom. God's own goodness and happiness don't depend on creation. He is infinitely perfect and blessed in himself. So his choice to create, to will the existence of other things, stems from his goodness wanting to share itself, but it's a free choice, not something required for his own fulfillment.
Ah, okay. So his love for creation is real, but it's a free, uncompelled love.
Exactly, which ties into chapter 23. God's action in creation isn't driven by physical necessity, like gravity making something fall. It's a deliberate act of free will.
And chapter 24 adds that he acts according to his wisdom. It's not random, but chosen wisely.
Precisely. His free choices are also perfectly wise choices, flowing from his infinite understanding.
There's also that interesting bit in chapter 22 about what's impossible for God. It's not about lacking power, is it?
No, quite the opposite. It defines what's outside the scope of omnipotence. God cannot do things that involve a logical contradiction or imply imperfection in himself.
Like making a square circle or sinning or changing.
Exactly. Those aren't failures of power. They're logical impossibilities or things contrary to his perfect nature. He can't be potential, he can't be mutable, he can't be flawed, because he is pure actuality and perfection.
Turning to creation itself. Chapter 31 argues it wasn't necessary for the world to have existed eternally.
Yes, he pushes back against views common in some Greek philosophy that the universe must be eternal.
Why wasn't it necessary?
Well, creatures don't have existence in themselves, they receive it. So their existence isn't inherently necessary. And God, as we just said, didn't have to create. His act was free. Therefore, the created order, beginning in time, is perfectly coherent with God's freedom and the dependent nature of creatures.
The sources mention arguments for the eternity of the world too, right? Like, nothing comes from nothing.
Yes, chapters 33, 86, and 97 engage with these. Aquinas grants the principle ex nihilo nihil fit, from nothing, nothing comes, applies to changes within the created order. You need existing matter to make something new.
Like needing wood to build a chair.
Right. But he says creation ex nihilo, creation out of nothing, is different. That's God bringing the entirety of a thing's being into existence where absolutely nothing of it existed before. It's a metaphysical act of the first cause, not just a physical transformation.
So the philosophical rule doesn't quite apply to the unique act of creation itself.
Act as an argument.
Okay, nearly there. Let's look at the role of creatures, specifically intelligent ones. Chapter LXE8 suggests they are intermediaries in God's governance.
Yes, the idea of secondary causality. God is the ultimate cause of everything, but he often works through the actions and natures of the things he has created. Intelligent creatures like angels and humans have a particular role in carrying out parts of the divine plan within the created order.
And this includes human choices. Chapter XC says our volitions are subject to divine providence. That's always a tricky one. Free will and God's plan.
It is profoundly difficult, yes. Aquinas affirms both genuine human freedom and God's universal providence. God's plan doesn't eliminate our freedom, but somehow encompasses it. His knowledge and power are so total that our free choices still fit within her work. His overarching design, often guided, as chapter XCI mentions, by higher causes under God's direction.
It's a mystery we probably can't fully resolve this side of eternity.
Very likely.
Finally, the last section touches on sin, punishment, and grace. Chapter CXEV states the punishment of losing our ultimate end union with God is interminable, eternal.
A sobering thought. If the ultimate purpose of life is achieved in eternal union with God, then the definitive failure to reach that end constitutes an eternal loss.
And chapter CAA 6 adds that there's also punishment involving suffering or pain.
Yes, consequences beyond just the loss of the good. And chapter CAT7 affirms the right of earthly judges to inflict punishments for the sake of justice and order in society.
But ultimately, achieving that final happiness requires something beyond us. Chapter CAC8 talks about needing divine grace.
Absolutely central for Aquinas. Our natural capacities alone, even perfected, aren't enough to reach the supernatural end of the beatific vision. We need God's freely given help, His grace.
And this grace doesn't force us to be good. Chapter CXA.
No, it assists and elevates our will, but doesn't compel it. Freedom remains. And chapter CL adds we can't merit this initial grace beforehand. It's a pure gift.
Which is why it's called grace. As chapter CLI notes, it's gratuitous, freely given.
Precisely. A gift rooted in God's love, enabling us to reach a destiny beyond our natural reach.
Wow. Well, we have certainly covered a lot of ground today, exploring these deep themes from Aquinas' of God and His creatures. Just scratching the surface, really, is part of our Wisdom of the Scholastic series.
It's incredibly rich material. His systematic thought, his careful distinctions, they really do reward careful reflection, don't they? Even centuries later.
They absolutely do. It shows how these fundamental questions about God, reality, our purpose, they endure.
Indeed. And Aquinas provides such a powerful framework for grappling with them.
Well, if you, our listener, found this discussion stimulating, please do consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel.
Yes, that really helps support the work we're doing here, bringing these classic texts into conversation.
And click that notification bell so you don't miss our future explorations. We'd also genuinely love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your own aha moments, perhaps, down in the comments section.
That interaction is invaluable. It helps shape future discussions, too.
Absolutely. Your engagement is what keeps this journey of discovery going. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.